All right, everybody. It is a true coffee and Celtics morning here on Green with Envy. We are live on YouTube a little bit earlier than usual due to some scheduling conflicts here, but we are going to get you guys covered as we get settled into our coffee here. All-stars were announced. Jaylen Brown's headed to the Bay to join Jason Tatum. We've got trade rumors, and in general, we just got a lot to catch up on. A week of Celtics basketball, a lot of basketball coming up on the other side of the show. So we got a lot to get into. So if you guys are up and at 'em early and join us here on YouTube, make sure you get in those comments. Would love to get some questions for you guys. It is a Friday coffee and Celtics. You know the deal. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy, a live Friday coffee and Celtics, which, as you know, proudly sponsored by Wood Island Media. Wood Island Media, a powerhouse production company for the past decade, specializing in celebrity, branded, and social content, based in Los Angeles, but roots in Boston. As always, is your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? I'm trying to get through this cup of coffee here, make sure we get through this show. And joining me, as he does each and every time, my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, one and only Greg Manakis. Greg, it's only been a week since we recorded an episode. But anytime, even though we've seen each other multiple times in person, including our trip to Dallas, which we'll get into at a later point in the show, it always feels like I've missed you a little bit when we haven't actually recorded like in a week. Like it feels like we've had an off week here.
We have, and let me just call out. I don't know if I like or dislike this subdued energy that you're bringing, where your brain clearly isn't firing on all cylinders. Like normally, your level of energy coming into a show, I'd put it, especially for the intro, I'd put it at like a 7 or an 8. I got you at like a 3 or a 4 right now.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, that was me pushing. You know what I mean? Like this is literally the first words that I've said. It's, I've been up for maybe 20 minutes, had to take care of the dog and stuff. Yeah, like it's
I've been up for 2 hours, so.
Yeah, see, there's a little bit of difference there, and also you have a kid. Like I know eventually that's going to be me in that position as well. But I guess you in general, you just like getting up early and getting the day started.
I get up, I did my workout, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, see, that's not for me. Like so this is the one thing is you get up like really early. I can get up like that's why usually when we do this at 8 a.m. that's kind of a perfect time because then I'm up by like 7:15. That last like 30 minutes or so, and what it is partially I knew that when I know that we're doing a show at a time that is not part of my usual routine, I've probably been awake, but I wasn't really sleeping, but I was kind of awake for the last like 45 minutes before I actually got up because I was like, I know that alarm's coming and I don't want to miss it. And so it's just like a little bit of like my mind is like, you can sleep, but don't sleep too much. And then so it's been a whole morning already, even though it's been a half.
Well, hey, let's get into this. Let's get into these all-star snubs and discuss Jaylen Brown making the all-star
Well, hold up. Before we do that, it's a Friday morning here. So first of all, thank you guys. If you are joining us here, please drop any comments that you have in the chat. But on a Friday morning, when we got a lot to catch up on, there's only one thing that we do around here, and we got to cue it up before we just jump right in, Greg. We got to pass the rock.
You guys ready? It's the plan, Bobby. We're winging it, Jerry.
Yeah! I got the rock now! I got this motherfucker now! What?
So, Greg, as you mentioned, I think the first thing that we need to start with on this episode here is last night they announced all of the all-star reserves for both the East and West. And so we found out the starters a week ago. So we know Jason Tatum, 6-time all-star, starting again in the all-star game, which real quick, do starters even matter anymore with this new format? Like, I don't understand why we have it's so confusing that we have 3 teams of 8, but yet
it's ceremonial.
Yeah. I guess they have to get picked first is probably how that goes, but that seems That just seems a little silly, if we're being honest, if we're picking 3 teams of 8. But regardless, the rest of the reserves were announced last night, and that includes Jaylen Brown getting his 4th All-Star nod. Joining him from the East is Pascal Siakam, Darius Garland, Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Damian Lillard, and Tyler Hero. Let's stick with the East, Greg. We'll talk about the West here in a second. But in the East, do you feel like they got it right? Anything that jumps out to you that was like a little surprised that this happened or didn't happen?
I mean, in a meritocracy, I think they got it right. And if you're thinking about the best product in terms of engaging all of the generations that are currently watching basketball, either, with the whole ratings talk, or if we're talking about like just consuming things on YouTube or TikTok, I think they missed out on a couple of stars that probably would have really helped to continue to grow the popularity of this weekend. Notably LaMelo Ball and Trae Young. I feel like both of those guys are 2 of the most popular players amongst young kids.
Did you hear what Trae Young said?
I did not know.
So, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, he said that instead of calling it getting snubbed, you should call it getting trade. So he's pleased with it, but
he's having a great year. I think the Hawks, but it sucks that Jaylen Johnson's going to be out the rest of the year with a torn labrum.
Dude, that is brutal news. That caught me by surprise. I must have missed like when he got hurt. It must have been a pretty quick diagnosis, because that caught me completely off guard that all of a sudden he was out for the season. And he was literally one of the guys on the bubble from our quarter of the year into the season. We were like, gotta keep an eye on Jaylen Johnson. And as like a lot of the articles that you would read, like who different writers were picking, there were some people that were picking Jaylen Johnson to make the All-Star team. So
he's averaging a double-double, man.
Yeah.
And it sucks to see, as someone who's had 2 torn labrums. It's a tough recovery, but if you don't get it fixed right away, that thing is just going to linger. It's always going to pop out on you. The labrum is the ligament that kind of keeps the ball and socket joint, keeps the ball in the socket. So if you don't get that fixed right away, like John Morant had that injury last year, so that's why he missed the end of the season last year. It's something you want to get fixed. I never got my left shoulder fixed. I got my right shoulder fixed, and my left shoulder still pops out like when I'm sleeping. So highly recommend getting surgery if you get a torn labrum in your shoulder. Shout out to Jaylen Johnson, one of my favorite players in the NBA. Stinks to see him go down. But back to Trae, like if the Hawks over the last, they're now 22 and 26 after they got smoked last night. If they were 26 and 22, maybe there's a different conversation with Trae Young getting onto the All-Star team, but he didn't. It stinks for the kids. Honestly, it stinks for the kids that him and LaMelo aren't in it. Cause like when you look at the other guys that did make it, I know Tyler Hero's having a great year. Pascal Siakam's playing well. Like nobody wants to see Pascal Siakam play in the All-Star game.
That's a very fair point. 100%. Nobody wants to see that spin move in the All-Star game. That's not going to draw ratings. That's a fair point. And I don't know. I'm still baffled by how much the kids love Trae Young and LaMelo Ball. Like I think it's my age.
Big the long ball, baby.
Yeah, but it's just so hard to wrap my head around. Like you said, the Hawks are 22 and 26, and that's not new. Like the Hawks being a play-in team has been, other than that one season that they made that kind of surprise conference finals run, that's been the story of Trae Young, is that they're going to live somewhere in the 7 to 10 seed. Like, you know what I mean? And LaMelo Ball, wake me up when they have anything close to a winning record. Like I don't know. It's just so confusing, but you're right. Like those are far more exciting All-Star game format type players. So in that sense, I think that's kind of a missed opportunity. But I think overall, right before this came out, I just tweeted out like who I thought was going to make it. I thought it came down to, I got everybody right except for I had Trae Young over Damian Lillard was who I had in the final spot. And someone mentioned, they thought Dame was going to get in. I was like, honestly, Dame, LaMelo, Trae, I think it's a toss-up. I think all 3 of those guys are kind of right there on the bubble. Dame's going to get a little bit of a bump for being on a winning team. And then it's Trae and, leads the league in assists. LaMelo statistically, his numbers are insane to not make an All-Star game. Like he's averaging over 28 points per game. Now he has only played 31 games. So there's a little bit of a ding there for the games I was looking at him and Tyler Hero. I'm like, man, Tyler Hero's played 45 games. Like, that's a pretty significant chunk at this point in the season that he's played more. And, the Heat are a 500 team, nothing crazy, but they're a 500 team with all the Jimmy bullshit mixed into it, and Bam not being Bam this season. And so Tyler Hero really being that team's best player for this season. So I don't really have too many issues with the East. I think, like I said, it was a toss up between some of those last spots. And yeah, for what the fans wanted, probably not the way to go, but I think on court, hard to get too upset about it.
Yeah, when you think about just jersey sales, right? The NBA released like the top 15 jersey sales this year, and 12 out of the 15 guys are all-stars. The 3 that are not all-stars, John Morant, who is number 7, he hasn't played enough games. Injuries, right? You have Devin Booker at 14. Devin Booker, huge
didn't make it. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah.
And LaMelo Ball was at 12. So LaMelo Ball clearly, based off of jersey sales, which is a pretty strong indicator of popularity, it stinks that he didn't make the team. I kind of wanted to see LaMelo Ball in the All-Star game. As much as I don't love his game for the regular season, like, he'd be the perfect guy in an All-Star game.
Yeah. By the way, Greg, who's number 1 on that list? Just so everybody knows.
What I see is Steph Curry.
Oh, I thought it was. Is it number 2? Jason Tatum. Where's Jason?
Jason Tatum's number 3. It goes Steph Curry, LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brunson.
Okay. There was a different one that came out recently that was jersey sales just for like the first half of the season, and Jason Tatum was number 1. There's a different one that I had seen, so I thought it was that one that you were looking at. But one thing, just real quick, I don't really understand how like the votes and jerseys and some of these things like transfer over, because I was thinking like LaMelo like was the lead guard vote getter in the East. I kind of thought he'd be actually a little higher than 12, if I'm being honest, as far as like jersey sales go. So it's interesting to think about how all of that works. But anyways, let's go to the West All-Stars real quick, because those were announced as well. Greg, you mentioned Devin Booker, not on this list, but the guys that are: Anthony Edwards, Anthony Davis, James Harden, Jaren Jackson Jr., Alperen Sengun, Jalen Williams, and of course, Victor Wembanyama. So Devin Booker, one of the biggest names left off. I think Domantas Sabonis, another one, who's another guy that kind of
14 and a half rebounds.
Yeah, he's 21. He fits. He's kind of the Trae Young of the Western Conference, leading the league in rebounds, 21 points per game. I think he's actually shooting the ball exceptionally well from 3. I forget the numbers, but I think by the numbers or by the percentages, I think he's in the top 5 in the league in that.
He's played 44 games. Do you know how many double-doubles he has?
I heard this last night. I believe it's 42.
Yeah, 42 out of 44 games. He's averaging 14 and a half rebounds, dude.
And he's not an all-star, man. And listen, you know, like, do you think who do you think he should have been on there over? Would be the question. Because the West is pretty loaded when it comes to this. Like, I thought the Dame, Trae, and
I just hate
LaMelo was a toss-up, but who?
I hate James Harden. So I just leave him off.
Yeah,
of him. I mean,
the Clippers have been a nice story. So let me ask you this: if it was Norm Powell instead of James Harden, who's another guy that's had an unbelievable year that could be considered in, so let's just remove the James Harden from it. Would you have been okay because the Clippers feel like they need some type of representation with what they've done this year? Would you have been more okay if it was Norm Powell over James Harden?
No.
Okay, you need some bonus on that list.
Yeah, I need Sabonis on there, man. I mean, after what he did to the Celtics, that was one of the most impressive performances against a fully healthy Celtics team too. I haven't been a huge Sabonis fan. I actually kind of liked him in the Netflix documentary. I know it was like very cookie cutter and whatnot, but to put up with his wife, man, I thought he did a really good job just putting up with his wife.
I never actually finished that, so I don't know. But for me, I watched the first 2 episodes, and then I was like, there was just too many episodes for like how mundane it was. I was like, I don't need to watch all of this. This is too much.
Well, you should have made it to the end, because that's where it was all Jason Tatum and the Celtics win in the finals.
That's true. I probably will watch that part back at some point. But yeah, dude, the West is just loaded, man. Like those are some pretty, like the Devin Booker, the Domantas Sabonis, like those are some pretty big names that didn't make it on here. But like, and I mentioned Norm Powell's having an amazing year. He's at least in consideration. Like this is pretty stacked right now. What the West.
Kyrie didn't make it. Dude,
Kyrie, I knew there was a name I was missing.
The
Kyrie's
popularity of the guys. Yeah, Kyrie, Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Devin Booker. Like those 4 guys are so popular and so fun.
Right.
and they didn't make the All-Star game. It's just like
those are guys that you would think
it should be a meritocracy. It really should be. And like I think Kyrie, when it just like based on merit this year, especially without Luka keeping the Mavericks afloat, I feel like that's probably just as impressive as what James Harden has done. Who are the other guys that made it from the West again?
Yeah, so it was Anthony Edwards. I think there's no issue there.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis, no issue there. James Harden, who we've talked about. Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. He's been having an awesome year. He deserves to be there. Şengün, he's had a great year. I think it's just like the Rockets are the 2 seed, and he's the best option, right?
Yeah.
Like he's been really good. Jaylen Williams, and then Wemby. And Wemby's definitely making it. And then it's like Jaylen Williams, like you're really not going to give the Thunder 2. You know what I mean?
But is he an all-star?
Right. I mean, I think that's the guy that you would have to I think between him and Harden, those are the 2 that you might look at that there's potential to swap those for some of those other guys. But it's like, do you really need to reward the 24 and 22 Suns with a second guy? I don't know. I mean, Devin Booker's been pretty good. I think Kyrie, is the guy that Kyrie and Sabonis are probably the 2 that I look at that I think they should be on this team. And ultimately, I would probably take off Harden and Jaylen Williams. I think if the Jaylen Williams is the tougher one, Harden I would replace with one of those
guys. Player. He's just like probably not an all-star yet, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just tough because he does a lot for that team, man. He does a lot for them. So I don't know. We'll see what happens here. I know the All-Star draft from the TNT guys is happening, I think, next week. So we can talk about what that looks like because I honestly don't know what that's going to be and what that looks like with all those teams. So we can move that to next week. But the All-Star starters that is happening in San Francisco down the bay, both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown will be there representing your Boston Celtics. Greg, passing the rock to you. What you got next?
Okay, the Celtics obviously lost to the Houston Rockets earlier this week, where Dylan Brooks went absolutely bananas in that game and was just shit talking the entire TD Garden. And it just got me thinking about like great NBA villains and what makes a great villain. So I have 4 criteria for you, Will, and I want you to just add on to the criteria if you can think of any. Alex, if you've got any suggestions, feel free to throw them in the chat. So they have to at least be decent at basketball, right? They have to be at least decent, but decent to great. It doesn't matter. Like once you're decent, you can be a villain all the way up to great. Great players can also be villains.
Real quick, when you're defining decent, like let me give you 2 names. Let me see. Okay. I'm pretty sure these guys qualify, but just want to get like a baseline. So like Marcus Smart, obviously that counts, right? Like as a guy that fits that. Lance Stevenson for a time. I don't think always throughout his career, but I think there's a subset.
He's on my list. He's on my list.
Okay, so we're in the same ballpark. I just wanted to make sure we were thinking along the same lines.
Okay, face. Got to have a super hateable face. Not afraid to give hard fouls. Not afraid to talk a lot of shit. And they have to have irrational confidence, especially as you trend more towards decent on the spectrum versus great on the spectrum. The more irrational confidence you have as you trend towards decent, I think is really important for a great villain. All right, so decent game, hateable face, hard fouls, shit talker, irrational confidence. That's 5 criteria. Would you add any criteria for a great villain?
I think this kind of fits into some of what you're saying. There has to be some type of charisma, if you will, like, and it might be bad or negative, but it's an energy that attracts, right? Okay, because they suck you in. Like when we were like watching that Celtics game against the Rockets and thinking of Dylan Brooks, it's one of those things where I think he's such a front runner and such a punk, but if he sucks you in, like it messes you up. I think we got sucked in. Like I 100% think he won the mental game in that Monday night. Like he sucked us in. And if you look at some of our possessions in the second half, we're just like, who does Dylan Brooks think he is? And you know, for all his faults, he's still a pretty good defender. And we spent like half the game. Defender. We spent half the game just being like, let's go one-on-one at Dylan Brooks. And it's like, you know, like
even Scal was getting into I was like, Jaylen, you got to go at him. You got to go at him. It's like,
That's exactly
dude,
what he
we
was trying to do. He was trying to do that.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, get out of your offense. Go one-on-one against me. Like, you might get me a couple times, but we also have, if you get by me, Amen Thompson's flying in wherever. You know, we've got Tari Eason on the other side coming in for picks. Like, they have such a good defense around that if you focus on just him, like, the rest of their defense is like, cool, now we can just ball hawk. And we completely sucked into it. And I think it's part of the reason we lost was he won the mental game versus us. And as someone that is very anti Dylan Brooks, oh, that was fucking frustrating to watch. It was
pretty
frustrating to watch that night.
Okay, so what I want to do right now, Will, now that we have our 6 criteria, I just want to have like an off the prompt, off the cuff. It's still early, still drinking our coffee. Off the cuff villain draft right now.
Okay. All right.
So I'll give you first pick.
Let's do it.
I'll give you first pick. And it can be present or past players.
Okay,
Anybody that's ever
cool.
played in the NBA. I'll give you first pick.
So first name that pops to mind, I'm gonna take Pat Bev. I feel like Pat Bev is a very perfect villain. So I mean, I think he fits up just about all the criteria, and he's always floundering on like, is he actually decent? But then he is usually, he ends up on these teams where he has an outsized importance because of what he brings in that villain mentality. So yeah, I like Pat Bev as that pick. He's just the guy that represents a lot of what you said to me. So he jumped out first.
Yeah, and people that are watching on YouTube or Twitter right now, feel free to throw your favorite villains in the chat. Alex, if you want to throw some villains in the chat, feel free. And feel free to put them on the screen as your man in the chat there. Alex, appreciate you, man. Okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to stay with a present day player. I've got a whole bunch from the past that I've made a list of. So I'm kind of stalling and filibustering here to give you a little bit more time to think, Will, because I threw this on you. But I'm going to go with ex-Celtic Mo Wagner. Mo Wagner is such a great villain, and he's like just decent enough.
This year he was good. Before he got hurt. Like, this was like one of the first years where I'm like, I wouldn't press on you for the criteria of being decent. The last year or two he's been with his brother, he's been pretty good. But that's a great one because he could honestly just play in the next Die Hard movie right now.
Right. He could be a villain. Even if he didn't have any game, he's a villain just purely based off of the charisma thing that you talked about in the face. Like, maybe the most hateable face in the NBA right now is Mo Wagner. So I'm gonna. There's just like, when you look at him, don't you just want to punch him? But you're like kind of scared to punch him because if you punch him, he's just gonna like put you in a pretzel.
Yeah. No, I mean, he looks like a guy that has some evil shit behind those eyes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something nefarious going on inside.
Maybe it's his German heritage. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I'm definitely doing like the anti-German thing right now. Like I apologize to anyone that's German that's listening because I would probably say the same. All right, so it goes back to me now. This did throw me for a bit of a loop, so I'm trying to think of other guys that really jump out as a villain. I mean, I kind of like this guy, but I could see people thinking of him as a villain. I'm gonna go with Joakim Noah. I feel like
it's a great pick.
Yeah. I think Joakim Noah, like, he's one of those guys that, especially because he has an unorthodox game. And so when he gets in your face, when he starts trash talking you, and then if he's doing, because he had a couple of those seasons where his awkward ass jumper was like was on a couple of times, and you're like, this isn't right. This isn't how the basketball is meant to be played. I don't want my kid watching this. This is rated NC-17. You shouldn't be watching what Joakim Noah is doing because I don't want you to emulate this. This is not how basketball was meant to be played. But when it worked, it was frustrating. And he's the guy that, if you're a Bulls fan, you were like, that's my fucking guy. I mean, that's how we felt about Marcus Smart a lot.
Right. So I want to amend our list real quick. Because I had mentioned the decent game to great game. I love the word unorthodox that you threw in there. I feel like they could have an unorthodox game. That's probably part of the list because as I'm looking through my list, I feel like a lot of these guys do have somewhat unorthodox games. And then I also like the idea of you saying, like, if he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, you hate him. I think that's a really important part of a great villain. And the Green Boomer just took my guy. So my next pick was going to be Draymond Green. So Draymond Green is my next pick here. So you have Pat Bev and Joakim Noah.
How many of these are we doing? Because I'm running out of names right now. So are we doing one more pick?
Dude, pause. Drink some
Okay.
coffee. You'll come up with some names if you just think about it. Think back to like over the past 20 years. Think back to, the 90s. There's tons of great villains in the 90s that you can think about. So I'm gonna go Draymond Green there. And if we want to snake this one, I can
Yeah,
grab
go
somebody
ahead.
from the
Go ahead,
90s.
grab somebody. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna go Anthony Mason. Anthony
Ooh, Anthony
Mason
Mason's a good one.
is maybe the greatest New York Knicks villain of all time. Maybe. Still thinking about that. But I think Anthony Mason, I've talked about this before on the pod, my favorite player all time for the Celtics, because I was born in 89. I'm from Dorchester. I went to BC mainly because of this guy, Dana Barros. Dana Barros is my favorite player growing up. Love DB. Shout out to DB. Come back on the pod, my man. And he had this crazy streak of like 80 something games in a row with a 3-pointer in the New York Knicks. Did everything that they could to prevent him from going to like game 83 or 84, whatever it was. And at the end of the game, I still remember the broadcast cutting to Anthony Mason as they were like triple teaming Dana Barros and denying him the ball. Anthony Mason at the free throw line, hands on his knees with this perfect villain grin on his face. Like, we just stopped this motherfucker from getting the streak. So Anthony Mason's there for me. So I got Mo Wagner, Draymond Green, Anthony Mason.
All right, you inspired me to go classic here. And this is a guy that we didn't really watch, but we watched so much of their clips growing up. I'll go Bill Laimbeer. Like,
Great
this
pick.
is like we only know him because of being a villain. Like, I remember
Mhm.
it wasn't until probably I was in either high school or maybe even like college where I found out he was like a 2-time All-Star. Like that never like crossed my mind, right? Because he was just the goon villain type in the 80s where it was like, oh yeah, Jordan rules, right? And it all was funneling it to Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn, and Laimbeer was kind of the face of that. And so I always just thought of, Bill Laimbeer was just a big goon in the in the 80s for the Pistons when they were playing Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But it's like, oh shit, this guy's a fucking all-star out here. But that's one of the guys that when you just think of all-time classic villains, and he would be, if you ever watched any of those old school clips, when he does get into an altercation, he kind of has this like devilish smile that comes across. Because once again, like I was talking about with the mentality part that like Dylan Brooks beat the Celtics with, that's what he was trying to do. He's just trying to suck you in. That's what most of these guys are trying to do, is sucker you in to, they know that that's one of their skills to be in the NBA, is their mental warfare that they're playing.
Yeah.
So I'll go Bill Laimbeer. I think that's my fourth pick, right?
I think that's your third, because it had
pick.
snaked
Okay.
to me. So I'll snake it back to you. You get another one.
Take it back to me here. You know what? I'll go with Dylan Brooks. I mean, I know we've already talked about him, but but he needs to be
That's
on
fine.
this list. Like,
Yeah,
he's
absolutely.
been. I just do not like Dylan Brooks. I think he's a front runner. I said that a few moments ago. But listen, I understand the value, and it's so funny because when it turns on these guys, man, does it turn quickly. Like, remember people thought Dylan Brooks was going to Shanghai? Like when he left the Grizzlies, when it was like, who's signing Dylan Brooks? Look at what he just did in the playoffs. Dude got what, $20 million a year for 4 years.
And I mean, Draymond hit him with the dynasty starts after you.
Right, exactly. And he's a really big part of that Rockets team, right? Like he's been part of what Ime wanted to do in setting a culture, and it's kind of bringing him and Fred VanVleet to not have a team of all just sub 22-year-olds. It's kind of him and Fred VanVleet, and I know Uncle Jeff's in the background, but like they're kind of leading the way for like setting the tone for that team. And he's really important, but he's also his literal nickname is Dylan the Villain. So I think he's got to be on.
Yeah, he's got to be on there. All right, I'm gonna go my last two picks here just to keep it moving. I'm gonna go with the guy that you already mentioned in Lance Stevenson. I think Lance Stevenson, he's probably like the closest to not being a viable enough NBA player to being on this list.
He had a moment though. He had a moment.
He did.
Where
he has game.
He
has game. He just like didn't have a super long career, and he was a mess of a human being. So Lance Stevenson, and then I'm gonna go with Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman is such a villain that like his kids hate him. Like Trinity Rodman's comments about Dennis Rodman are they're really sad. They're really sad when you hear her speak. By the way, Trinity Rodman, I'm a huge fan of Trinity Rodman. I think she's going to be like the face of women's soccer for the next 20 years. So Trinity Rodman, big fan.
Shout out to her.
Shout out to Trinity Rodman. So my 5 are Mo Wagner, Draymond Green. Who did I have there? Lance, Dennis Rodman. Who's my last guy?
Dennis Rodman was your last guy.
No, who's my third guy? I'm missing one.
Anthony Mason.
Anthony Mason. Yep. Pretty good
There
five.
we go. Okay. So what are my four
Your
that I
last pick.
have right now?
You've got Pat Bev, Joakim Noah, Bill Lambier,
and Dylan Brooks.
and Dylan Brooks. Yep.
And Dylan Brooks. Okay. So for my last guy, okay. Actually, this is kind of perfect timing. Let's go Jimmy Butler.
Great villain. I didn't have him on my list.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a guy that soaks up the moment, but also, it's that tries to. It's all guys that are trying to bring you into the. Now he has probably more game than just about anybody that we've actually mentioned on this list to back up when he sucks you into that environment. But he very much takes what Dylan Brooks tries to do, and if I'm being honest, backs it up more times than not than Dylan Brooks would. And he can, you have to kind of respect it a little bit more. But he is that same type of dude that is trying to bring you down to his level because he's skilled, but he's not the most skilled. Like he knows he's very well aware that there's
there's that unorthodox nature to his game.
Exactly. There's 10 to 15 guys that are have always been more skilled than him, but mentally, if he can out physical them, if he can bring them down to this level that takes them off their game and amplifies his game, he's made 2 finals runs doing it. So, I mean, I think he's a guy that, especially when from a Celtics point of view, we've seen it over multiple 7-game series of what that looks like. He's a guy that I think needs to be on this list for sure.
Couple quick shout outs. Shout out to Danny Ainge. Shout out to Marcus Smart. Shout out to Ron Artest. Shout out to Steven Jackson.
Action Jackson. That's a good
one.
Matt
Barnes.
I saw Ron Artest and Reggie Miller in the chat here. I was like, I was thinking of even Ben Wallace. I really liked, but you could put him on that list as well. I think anyone from the Mouth of the Palace, I think you could put on that list. But definitely. That was a good one, Greg. I like that. That was fun. Impromptu, but I liked it. All right, let me go to mine here. So it's trade season, just about. We'll see. Everything's kind of held up with the Jimmy Butler news. DeAaron Fox, I'm surprised you haven't talked about your boy. I'm curious to know if you've already tried to find a way to get him to the Celtics. We'll talk about that here in just a second, because I feel like that's one of your top guys that if he could ever be in a Celtics uniform, DeAaron Fox is near the top of that list. So he's on the market, Greg. Let's see if you can Brad Stevens it up and get him to the Celtics. But I'll lead with one bit of Celtics news that dropped last night that I think actually is finally the first time I'm really intrigued at a potential move the Celtics could make. And it's one I'd be honest, I completely overlooked because I just didn't even think of this team because I thought they would continue to fight, but they're just in such a bad spot. It's the Philadelphia 76ers, man. They're still in 11th place. And the Embiid news, I don't know.
1-3 in a row.
1-3 in a row. So maybe that's going to hurt this case here. But the rumor that came out last night from Michael Scotto over at Hoops Hype was potentially, but about a little bit of dancing bear back to the Celtics. Yabu to the Celtics. Apparently, several teams have expressed interest in trading for Yabusele, including the Celtics, Knicks, Nuggets, and a few others. After 6 years away from the NBA and an impactful Olympics with France this past summer, Yabusele's returned to the league and proven he's here to stay. The French forward has averaged 10.4 points on 50.2% shooting from the field and 39.3% from beyond the arc, with 5.5 rebounds in 26.2 minutes. He's only on a 1-year deal. He'll be an unrestricted free agent going into next season. So I'm a little interested. I think Yabu is actually kind of a piece that we're missing. If we're looking,
I wanted the Celtics to sign him in the offseason, and instead we signed Tillman.
Yeah, and so I mean that would kind of be the trade, would be Tillman, or if the Sixers pressed you. Well, let me ask you this: so Tillman, I think then it would just be, do you give up a 2nd-round pick, 2 second-round picks? I don't know, whatever you'd have to give up some type of draft compensation to go that route.
Mm-hmm.
What if they really like Jordan Walsh? Would you do Jordan Walsh for a half season of Yabu, knowing that he's probably, I mean, we're just going to have very little flexibility going forward, but, and I guess because he's on our team, maybe we can stretch, but there's a lot of financial weird decisions coming down the line. So it's likely a half-year rental. Would you trade whatever potential may exist with Jordan Walsh for Yabu?
I think I would. I think I would. I think Jordan Walsh, I love Jordan Walsh. I think he's got a ton of potential, as you said. I just think you have such a short window to win a championship, and Jordan Walsh isn't helping you to win that championship this year. And Yabu is. I think you could also look at Yabu. I know he's a little bit smaller than Al, but you could look at him as a potential Al replacement down the road. We were hoping it would be Tillman. It just hasn't panned out. His body is deteriorating at an alarming rate. So I think Yabu's the guy. I hadn't thought about this until you just mentioned it now, which got me really excited because I didn't think about the Sixers selling. And I don't think
That's why when I saw this last night, I was like, because we've had a few people who have mentioned to us in the comments on YouTube, they can make trades. I'm like, dude, go look at the list of guys that make less than $4.5 million, or 4.4 million, which is the Jaden Springer level. And remember, the Celtics have to match everything 1-to-1. Like it has to be like exact or less, right? Like that has to be the way that this works. And it's like there is just like, other than guys that are on rookie deals that clearly are not getting moved, like even the Walker Kessler, it's like you'd have to throw in 3 first-round picks or 2 first-round picks because all you're giving back is Jaden Springer, and like that's just not worth it. Like especially for the future of this team. And so this is the first name, and because I had not thought about even looking at the 76ers roster, like I hadn't thought about it. So I saw this report and I was like, gotta add this to my rundown tomorrow because I'm into this idea of getting I think another wing that also can play a little bit bigger. I think that's kind of perfect for what the Celtics are missing right now, if there's a chance to add anything at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely need somebody else with a little bit more versatility in their game from the center position. Like Luke is pretty much a one-trick pony on offense. Kata is a one-trick pony on offense. Al, at this point, can kind of just move the ball and shoot threes. And then Porzingis obviously is the unicorn, but they don't have anybody that can deck the ball from the 5 position. And Yabu, I think, can at least go 1 to 2 dribbles off a shot fake and do something with it, right? So I think Yabu makes sense for the team. I just think we need a little bit more help on the wing, man. I really do. That's where I would go. That's why I was upset that we didn't go with Lonnie Walker in the preseason. I was just like hopeful that just like his scoring punch would be enough to get him on the team, because there are times where the Celtics seem starved for creation. As much as Jaylen Brown has improved his post creation, Jason Tatum is unbelievable now as a point forward, and Peyton Pritchard has played really well. You just like don't see enough deep bag work from Drew Holiday or Derek White, right? They're very much system players, and they can't really create for others.
I'm with you. I just don't know how they find that at this trade deadline with what they have available. That's real tough. But on that Tatum point, did you see, I think it was the latest or one of the latest Russillo and Simmons podcast, where Russillo was like, and he's usually been kind of he's never been really negative on Tatum. He's just been like, listen, I know what you want me to do. Jokic is better, Giannis is better, I think Luke is better, like SGA is better. Like I think he's right next, but like I just don't think he's above them, which like I think to some fans is like, what the hell? And it's like, all right, that's reasonable. Like he's amazing. Yeah. He's just below.
He's better than Luka. Can we stop saying Luka's better than Tatum?
I'm with you. Like, I'm firmly in that camp. I think it's Jokic. I think it's Giannis. Then I think it's a toss up between SGA and Tatum.
I was thinking, Will, like if the Mavs offered Luka Doncic for Jason Tatum, the Celtics are saying hell no.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally with you. Like
I think if it's the other way, the Mavs actually think about it, because Luka is out of shape all the time, and he you have to play Luka's way. If you put Jason Tatum on that Mavs team, I don't know, man. I think they could definitely contend in the West.
I mean, he's at least available. He's available all the time. And like to the point that Russillo was making, and the Rockets game the other night, and even the Bulls game were 2 great examples of teams are just double teaming Jason Tatum at crazy rates, and he's still finding ways to turn the corner and make
that little double cross he's been doing, and the like half spin Smitty move to get out of those double teams. It's really impressive. I think teams will start like seeing that on tape and probably planning for that a little bit more. But he's so shifty, man. I mean, he's always had such a great in and out dribble since his rookie year, and now he's added that little double cross to break down the double team. So Tatum's great.
Yeah, that's a super impressive part of his game, even over the last couple of weeks that's really been standing out. But before I pass it back to you, Greg, did you ever come up with the DeAaron Fox trade? Did you get curious to jump into the trade machine?
I wanted to talk about Fox, so that was where I was going to take this. I haven't jumped into the trade machine yet, but I'm just excited for the possibility, since you and I live here in Austin, Texas, of DeAaron Fox ending up in San Antonio, because San Antonio is an hour and 20 minutes away. They play in Austin twice a year. That's probably going to increase over the next couple of years. And I love DeAaron Fox, man. I've loved him since college. I think that it would be really fun to see him paired with Wemby. It would accelerate their timeline. Wemby, I think, is ready to win as soon as next year. So I think getting Fox onto that team make them really fun in the play-in this year, potentially not even in the play-in, and then like getting in the top 6. And then for the next 4 years, like DeAaron Fox and Wemby together, that's going to be a real problem for the league. Other teams that I'm interested, obviously the Rockets, I think would be really fun for him to go to. Not sure what they would have to give up, because they can't trade Jaylen Green, they can't trade Şengün until the summertime, I believe. So
yeah,
I think
it would have to be. I mean, they have the salaries. I mean, like the Fred VanVleet works as a salary, Dylan Brooks plus some people works as a salary. But the question is going to be, would they within those salaries also give up Amen Thompson? Would they give up Jabari Smith?
It would probably be like Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, you know, like if you're talking players, and then like the other contract to get there, whether that's VanVleet or Brooks. So I just don't see the
Adams
Rockets.
makes a decent amount too.
Yeah. Steven Adams. I always forget about him. I've heard the Magic as well as a team that he might be fun for. Any other teams that he's not coming to the Celtics, so I haven't even really thought about it. But
I did. I looked into it just to see if you would. I mean, no, I mean literally the only path is you have to trade Jaylen Brown. Like there's literally no other path of
how much does Fox make this year?
It's like 35 million. So you would do Brown for him, and then you would have to, I mean, I think for the Kings then to not be like over a certain tax, they have to throw in some money, but the Celtics would be saving a little bit of money to get off of Brown to get Fox, and then you try to throw in, I think it was like Trey Lyles or something, like was a contract that works, maybe a draft pick or two, because you're trading Jaylen Brown on a 4-year deal, so you'd get some draft compensation. So there were ways to make it.
Celtics are too small. Then you start
right. It's not going to work. It would save you money, like so. There is like a way to. There is a financial reasoning that you might be like, hey, well, it's DeAaron Fox, slightly younger than Jaylen Brown, or they're basically about the same age.
Yeah, same age. I think, I mean, a few years ago when the Celtics it seemed like the Celtics were headed towards trading Jaylen Brown. That was a name that I wanted. I was like, the Celtics.
I remember that came up. That's why I was curious if you would jump back in on it. But other teams for DeAaron Fox, I mean, I think the Rockets and the Spurs are the two teams that really jump out, that make the most sense. I looked into the Magic as a team that I think would be interesting for DeAaron Fox. It's really hard to make that work. Jalen Suggs would likely be the main guy to have to go, but he's also in that Jalen Green like poison pill situation, which makes it really difficult to make anything work. And he's injured right now, and I don't know how long that injury is for, so it's kind of a weird situation. Miami will always come up as long as they're in this Jimmy Butler situation, like because
he's boys with Bam.
Yeah, exactly, and the connection with Bam. But I think kind of like same thing when they were going to get Dame. It's like, okay, and like Tyler Hero just made the All-Star team, so it's like cool. Now you have an All-Star backcourt, but you have a really small, not great defensive backcourt. And although you're getting, you have Bam, Khalil Ware, who I loved in summer league, and I was like, man, where's Khalil Ware? And he's just come out like a bat out of hell the last month.
I was talking to Hazard about that actually, because he went to IU. And he was like, man, like that dude can play. Like everybody was shocked.
Dude, I loved him in summer league because they played against the Celtics a couple times when I was checking out Baylor Shireman. I'm like, listen, I don't know if summer league doesn't always translate. And I was like, that guy looks freaking good. Like that looks like a real guy.
6'11" Wemby.
Yeah, and so now you get him and Bam, and so you have some stuff that you can work with, but I don't know the Kings are going to be like without you giving Hero back, and then they're kind of in the same situation of what's Hero and Sabonis versus Fox and Sabonis. Like you're kind of still in the same area. Maybe get some more draft picks, but I don't really know what other teams like I said, the Magic and Heat, but it's kind of tough to make work. The Rockets and the Spurs are just so obviously, I mean, other than the Lakers would always love to get themselves in there. They said they're not going to trade Austin Reeves, which one for one talent wise seems crazy, but when you're building a roster and he's making $12 million, like that's a pretty insane deal for Reeves.
It would be what, Reeves and Hachimura?
Something like that. Yeah. And some draft compensation. The biggest question for me, Greg, is I know you went down and you actually saw the Kings and Spurs was who you saw when you went down, right? So question for you, because you came back a really big Stephen Castle fan, and maybe you even liked him at UConn.
Yeah.
So if that's the holdup, because You're not so okay. You're completely taking that off the table.
Yeah, no, I'm not trading Steph Castle. I love Steph Castle. I think
Interesting.
he's one of those guys where like I mean, at UConn, think about the way UConn plays basketball and like think about how good Stephon Castle is and like the sacrifice that he made to play within that system. Like that
Right.
is such a team-oriented system. And he was just like the lockdown defender. Like that was kind of his role on that team, was he was just gonna like pick up full court and just like guard the hell out of people. And he scored. But he, he played within the system and he proved that he's super coachable. So I think that is something that you want. Like if I'm building my team around, like the types of personalities that I want, Steph Castle is the team first guy that he's also got great size. He's 6'5". He's a great defender. He's already got the old man, like deceleration step game down. He's got like a great Euro step, plays well in transition, decent shot, but he's got good form. So I think over time, especially being in San Antonio, I think that he'll develop a good 3-point shot. And I just want my guard. Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a lead guard, to be honest with you, but I think I want my guards, like if they could figure out a way to get Fox without giving up Castle, I think that is the perfect fit for him, is to play with somebody like Fox, play off of Fox. Fox is not a great defender, but he's a pesky defender and he can lock up whenever he wants. So I think that'll be a really fun backcourt. So no, I would not trade Steph Castle for DeAaron Fox.
Okay, that's good. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I see the points behind it. Part of me is just like I like Steph Castle from what I've seen. I know sometimes I know DeAaron Fox is an all-star. I'm putting with
DeAaron Fox is great.
And it's like, you're going to be in control of if this is where he wants to be, like year and a half plus, let's just add 4 to 5 years to that. That's 6 years of Fox that you're getting as an all-star in his prime.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Okay, let me take the ball back here. Let me take the rock back. See, I've got 2 different ones that I could do here.
It's got to be the last one because I got to run to
yeah. Okay. I'm gonna squeeze 2 for 1 in here then, because one I just want to give a shout out to. One is shout out to Kristaps Porzingis, man. He's been so good this year. Like, I started thinking about it before last night. I was like, is there any way that he might be able to still make an all-star team? He's played 22 games. It's just not going to happen. But he's been so good. And it's really funny. Like, most of his stats are slightly, other than his 3-point percentage, are all slightly down from last year, like total points, total rebounds. But I think maybe it's just because the rest of the team's been so inconsistent and he's been so consistent that it's jumping off the page to me that it's like Kristaps, even though Jaylen Brown just got named an all-star, like I think Kristaps has been the second most consistent player. He's not our second best player. He's been our second most consistent player in the times that he's been out there. And then this was really great from Taylor Snow the other night when he was just raining threes against the Bulls. His shortest 3-pointer was 27 feet, averaged 29.6 feet on his 8 3-pointers made. In order, they were 27 feet, 33 feet, 28 feet, 31 feet, 28 feet, 27 feet, 31 feet, 32 feet. Just absolute full Latvian laser that night. So I feel like I didn't want a week to go by where we didn't shout out KP for that. Any thoughts real quick on KP before I go to my final thing that will wrap us up here?
I'm hoping that you're going to talk about what KP did to us in Dallas.
I wasn't going to, but yeah, other than KP coming up 1 point short. So just real quick for the listeners here, when we went to Dallas, had a great time. Celtics got a win over the Mavs. Boys hanging out, a couple of beers, played a little bit of simulator golf. Had a fantastic weekend. Put in a solid parlay. I was trying to think earlier. I couldn't remember the other. I know it was Drew Holiday points that hit for us. We had 1 or 2 other things.
Drew Holiday was 9.5 points. So we hit the over on Drew Holiday.
He hit that pretty quickly too, I think.
Yeah. Then we had Kristaps 3-pointers made. So 2.5 threes for Kristaps. And then it was Kristaps 18.5 points. This man, we were like begging Joe Mazzulla to leave him in the game. He had multiple opportunities where he was just wide open in the corner and the Celtics just weren't passing him the ball. That was really frustrating because every time Kristaps got the ball, we were like freaking out, jumping out of our seats. And there was this Mavs fan behind us who was just miserable because we were smoking them. And the only enjoyment he was getting out of the game was watching us just sweat it out. And at the end of the game, they took Kristaps out. So shout out to the guy behind us, and shout out to the guy that flipped us off and left the game early because he must have had a ton of money on the Mavs money line or something. But he was really
The guy
upset.
flipped us off. I did not see.
Oh,
that.
you did, dude. You didn't see the guy. He was like 3 seats away from you, one row behind you to the left. He like anytime we were cheering, he was just standing up and like double birding us and flipping us off. And then there was a foul that was called. It was when Tatum and Gafford, when Gafford met Tatum at the top and blocked him. So when they initially called the foul on Gafford, he got so upset that it was a foul, he left the game.
That's hilarious. Good for that guy. Good for him, man. Good for you, dude. That's pretty great. I completely missed that, but great time in Dallas. Great time. Okay, Greg. Last thing here, because I think this is fun. This is not necessarily a draft. I know this is something that I think you've thought of before, and so I want to get your thoughts on it. But Adam Silver was on, I think it was the Dan Patrick show earlier this week. Talked about, hey, what are some changes that you ever thought might happen? And he talked about 10-minute quarters being something that the NBA has considered. I'm not really a big fan of that. I don't think that's necessarily the change that the NBA needs. Joe Mazzulla chimed in with his new quote, no more halftimes. No halftimes. Although he then, if you listen to the quote, very weirdly goes into unless it's like cricket and we have like 5 hours off and we can have dinner and wine. So I don't really know where Joe Mazzulla was going with that. That was kind of a weird Joe thing, but add it to the list. That will be in the next edit of Joe's quotes. But I have a couple changes that I think actually I would like to see, and then I want to see if you have any that you would add as well. So I think one that I think you and I have talked about before that we're both aligned, FIBA goaltending or the FIBA non-goaltending. That needs to be in the game. It's so much better, so much more exciting when they can go pull it off the rim. Love it. Let's put that in there. We don't need to shorten the quarters, Adam. Let's get rid of a couple timeouts. Let's just have a few less timeouts. Like that. I mean, that plays into Joe Mazzulla's hands as well. Like we don't need, like a lot of times coaches are just using timeouts just so they don't lose them. Right. Like let's just shorten the amount of timeouts you get and you don't lose. You just keep them. Like you get 5 for the whole game or whatever you want to do. Like you just get them as much as you want. So you don't have to just call a nonsense timeout just so you feel like, hey, at least I can't say I didn't use it. So I think that's kind of useless. And the last one I have, and this is one that I'm pretty sure I've mentioned before. Reviews, they're necessary, but they suck. So why are we letting the refs that are in the building, who can be influenced by the fans, what's happening in the game, any review, any challenge, send it to New York. And Greg, let's go old school on this. Remember back in like 2000, I think it was 2001 when the NFL first brought out challenges and they would go actually under the hood, like on the field. There was a 2-minute clock. Why did we go away from this? Let's get back to a 2-minute. If you can't figure it out in 2 minutes, leave it as a call on the floor.
Didn't we see that at the G League game that we went to for Lily? Didn't they have a challenge clock? I think it was like 1 minute.
I think I didn't realize what it was for, but I think that might have been it. Yeah, because that's what we need again, man.
I think they're testing that out. The only other thing I would say, because I really got to go to this work meeting, is I think it's Kirk Goldsberry who floated out the idea of teams having their own like home court dimensions, just like in baseball, how your fields can be different. Maybe there's like some slight differences that teams, maybe it's like, how you like when you're building a house and you can like kind of pick different options there. Like maybe you want a marble countertop versus like a granite countertop or whatever.
Like if you're the Warriors and if you have Steph Curry and Buddy Hield, maybe your 3-point line's a little bit further back.
Right.
Because like you guys have like the shooters for it and stuff.
Yeah. So that would be something else to think about. But yeah, I really got to go to this work meeting.
All right. Well, we're going to get out of here, guys. That's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. Celtics play the Pelicans tonight. Sixers on Sunday. We'll likely be streaming right after that Sixers game on Sunday. And then we will have more for you as it heads up to the trade deadline. But that's going to do it for this one. For Greg, for Will, I am Will. I'm out of here. Need some more coffee. Enjoy your weekend.